Hi, this is Chris Pearson, president of 5G Americas, and I am here for our 5G podcast series, which is Understanding 5G. And we are so fortunate today to have the CEO of the Small Cell Forum, Miss Sue Monahan. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Chris. It's nice to see you. Thanks for including me.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, I feel like we used to see each other at events and speaking and in meetings, and then it's like, wow, it's a whole new universe with COVID and just the various video calls. So it's great to see you.
You as well. Yeah, I think the last trip I took was out to see you in Kirkland at a board meeting.
Yes, that's right. So now we're at different times, but I wanted to start in the kind of tradition of our 5G podcast series at 5G Americas. We start out with just some personal questions you probably haven't got when you've spoken at a conference. So I'm going to start out. We got 3 personal questions to get us going. Are you prepared?
Ready.
All right. First one. What is your greatest extravagance?
Let's see. My greatest extravagance is houses. I buy houses. It's become a passion of mine since the market downturn in 2012 when I bought my first 2 investment homes here in Sarasota on Lido Key and Siesta Key. And I have some that are vacation rentals, some are full-time rentals, some have been renovated and flipped, and one was even torn down and rebuilt. It's so fun.
Wow, that's cool. Quite an extravagance, and plus probably hopefully making a lot of money. And I guess when I go vacationing in Florida, I'll know who to call. So for Airbnb.
Please do.
The next one is, what quality do you most admire in another person?
When I consider all of the wonderful qualities in the people I admire most in my business and social circles, it really comes down to integrity. I think that integrity is the foundation for all good qualities in each of us. And I believe that without integrity, you have nothing.
Yeah, great. And finally, the third personal question, where would you most like to live?
I'm living right where I want to be for now. As you know, Chris, I left a place I loved in Northern California in 2006 to help my aging parents in Florida. And that's how I came to be here in Sarasota. It's beautiful here. My utopia, though, would be to stay here on Siesta Key, but without the heat and humidity that comes with Florida living. And then, well, I could do without the hurricanes as well. But I think every location has its pros and cons, and perhaps in the future I'll flee to a cooler climate during the heat of the summers like the Florida snowbirds do. So I don't know. Lake Tahoe would be nice.
Yeah, great. Well, it sounds like you're living the dream right where you want to be. So maybe in a minute or less for our viewers, could you just tell us what is the Small Cell Forum for those that might not know?
So we are a global trade association, and we develop technical and commercial enablers that help accelerate small cell adoption and drive wide-scale densification globally. So our goal is really to make mobile connectivity an accessible and affordable resource for industries and enterprises in rural and urban communities. And the way we work is we gather requirements from service providers and businesses, and then we publish specifications and technical papers and enterprise-focused outputs for the benefit of the entire ecosystem. So like your organization, Chris, our work is member-driven and led by our executive board. And currently, our work plans span everything from split architectures to edge computing for small cell network services, private networks, neutral host requirements, 5G small cell product and components, and policy and regulation.
You're doing a lot of great stuff, and 5G Americas has been a partner with Small Cell Forums for quite a few years since we signed our MOU on things. So it's great to be a partner with you guys. So I guess the question I have then, when you're starting to think about cells, small cells, even metro cells or even any type of cells, what are some of the biggest challenges in deploying cells in a 5G network today?
Well, Small Cell Forum conducts an annual survey of operators and other types of deployers to understand their main challenges, and they tend to fall into a few main categories: ease of deployment and management, access to infrastructure, and total cost of ownership. So for outdoor small cells, quick and affordable access to sites and backhaul remain a challenge in many markets. In indoor enterprise environments, there are business model challenges specifically about how cost and management of small cells are shared between the operators, enterprises, and landlords. And you can get more details from our latest market status report with survey results on our website on smallcellforum.org.
Oh, great. How is the cell site processes going? Is it getting more efficient and streamlined, you think, or are there still some challenges in that area for like in the United States or Europe, things like that?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. So okay. So
I
it's getting
think that
more streamlined, but there's still challenges.
absolutely, and I think we've worked on some of those together, right? So addressing these barriers so that the networks can be deployed quickly and affordably requires a lot of cooperation between many stakeholders. So wireless industry groups such as ours can really help facilitate that. And I think a good example was the joint work we did with Small Cell Forum and 5G Americas on small cell siting challenges and recommendations, for instance. But I do think, we have a lot more work to do to make some of the, the socioeconomic case for small cells very clear to regulators and policymakers. I mean, both of our organizations are working on that. And we really need to encourage them globally to review their regulatory frameworks because it's essential to have a diverse and flexible approach to deployment.
Yeah, well, you bring up some good things. So let me go dive in a little bit further there. So, like as of today, what would be some recommendations do you have for the cellular industry when it comes to kind of the alignment process for building networks? I know we've aligned, I guess, on some of our white papers, but what would be your recommendations on some of the ideas of alignment and processes for building these great 5G networks?
Well, I think that the regulatory one that we touched on is a big one. Also, you look at the case of, in many cases, a scenario where it may be difficult for a traditional operator to make a good business case. It can profitably be addressed by network sharing or deployment by a neutral host, for instance. So we're also focusing a lot of effort in this area as well to ensure that the technical standards and solutions take into account the needs of the new and growing set of alternate deployers that we're seeing in addition to the traditional operators.
Right. And then you mentioned, regulations. What would you say are, what kind of, federal, state, or local regulatory challenges do you see for the small cell side? I mean, is it just characteristic only of a small cell when you think about these kind of local, state, federal regulations, or is it for all cells?
Well, I think our focus is on the small cells because really a lot of companies are needing to densify their networks using small cells to get ready for 5G. So
right.
And we need to differentiate because we can't have the same rules and regulations for a small cell that you would for a macro cell, for instance. It's a exactly. Whole different animal. So I think still the main challenges continue to relate to siting for outdoor. And again, another good area of collaboration between our organizations on the siting challenges and recommendations that we wrote together. But 5G is going to require a very large number of cells in many cities and in many locations in industrial environments. I mean, imagine if access and rental costs have to be negotiated separately for every individual site. Yeah. Or if the approval barriers are set too high, the time and cost to deploy just becomes non-viable. So we really need globally, we need a standardized light touch regulatory framework, governing the site and equipment approvals. It's vital. And again, we focus a lot of our energy in this area around the globe as well.
Yeah, no, I think that comment you just made, that light touch regulatory environment is something I think is needed for, when we look at the densification and densification of across all types of cells, small, pico, whatever you want, small cells, metro cells, or even macros. So I like that idea of light regulatory touch. I know in our paper we talked about that together a few years ago in that partnership. What is the mix, do you think, as far as the kind of the trends when it comes to the mix of a pico and a small and a macro cell? You do a lot of studies. What would you say the marketplace trends are when it comes to this mix of types of cells?
Well, 5G use cases and the deployment scenarios are so varied that there will be a requirement for many different mixes of macro and small cells. In 5G, all cells of every size are going to require flexibility of architecture and common interfaces. Using cloud-based virtualized networks will allow for common platforms for all cells, from semiconductor to application layers. And so ecosystem players can innovate with the assurance of interoperability and economies of scale. These common platforms mean that cells of all sizes will be developed so that each operator can decide whether to take a macro first approach or to focus on 5G densification while keeping 4G for coverage.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you mentioned densification. What, where do you see densification happening at a very rapid pace? I mean, from a global side, because Small Cell Forum is a global organization. I know you're based in the United States and Florida, but you're a global organization. And then how are we doing in the United States as well, I guess? So two questions in that one.
Yeah, well, in many ways, the US has led the way in 4G densification, and now operators are acquiring new mid-band spectrum, so they appear set to embark on 5G densification too. Other areas of rapid progress that we're seeing globally, especially for urban and campus networks, are in Japan and China.
Yeah, that's true. And so so the US and Asia Pacific are kind of leading at this stage?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. And then you mentioned mid-band spectrum, so that gets me to the idea of small cells being deployed everywhere. We just had in the United States recently a C-band auction, which was some really great spectrum, mid-band spectrum out in the marketplace. But we also have low, mid, and high-band spectrum in the marketplace. What happens as far as the small cell marketplace to accommodate low, mid, and high band? What is most of the small cells, are they addressing all the bands or just the densification because of the mid band and high band? Where does it fit into the kinds of spectrum?
Well, in Small Cell Forum, we have work items that are focused on open small cell architectures and designs that support all spectrum bands, and some particular work on open interfaces for like millimeter wave and mid-band spectrum, because these are particularly suited to cells with moderate to low range. So far, millimeter wave has mainly been used for fixed wireless and at high power levels, but it will be more commonly used for densification and industrial networks and will drive a significant new build out of small cells when you look at our forecasts in the mid-2020s. And unlicensed spectrum is interesting, and we're keeping a close eye on the new standards for 5G unlicensed, which will particularly target mid-band spectrum such as 6 gigahertz, which of course is well suited to small cells. Unlicensed spectrum for 4G really didn't play a major role in the end, but we think the requirement for a wide variety of spectrum bands will be higher in 5G because of the diversity of use cases and the importance of deployers without access to licenses. So this has already been clearly illustrated by the initial deployments we've seen in the US's CBRS general access spectrum.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on in the both the license and unlicensed space in our industry, and how really cellular industry is addressing unlicensed a lot better now.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned openRAN. So openRAN has really got to be one of the hottest topics out there in our industry right now. You see headline stories almost every other day about openRAN and different opinions on it. 5G Americas has done a white paper on it from a technical aspect of openRAN, which is available on our website. And where does openRAN possibly impact the small cell industry, or does it not in the Small Cell Forum viewpoint?
Yes, openRAN is nothing new in the small cell industry, and we have always aimed to enable open multi-vendor platforms because that helps lower the barriers to densification for everyone. So specifically, our FAPI, family of specifications, which are a family of common interfaces, they essentially allow small cell component suppliers to compete. So we've just updated our specs for 5G. So these specs will play a significant role in making openRAN a reality. And the reason it's such a hot topic, I think, openRAN has gained the support of a lot of large operators for initiatives such as the O-RAN Alliance, and we're delighted because this is driving increased interest in our small cell openRAN work also.
And then with openRAN, I mean, this is a question kind of beyond openRAN. Where do you see as far as like private wireless networks versus public networks and small cell deployments? I mean, is openRAN in that mix, or is it more of like, hey, this is just private networks are just part of the overall ecosystem, whether you're openRAN or not openRAN?
Well, I think it's part of it. Our market status survey results are indicating that private networks will really become increasingly important in accelerating deployment of small cells. So this is particularly true for in-building industrial and IoT environments that may have either special performance requirements or a need for special industry knowledge. And I think we'll see many types of companies deploying private networks, including, dedicated departments with traditional operators, specialists in various vertical sectors, and neutral host deployers. So private networks are very important to driving the rollout of small cells, since each enterprise environment will have different requirements and economics. So clearly, a one-size-fits-all model will definitely not work in 5G.
Yeah, and actually, that's the thing. You talk about private networks and public networks, and you start thinking about cell sites. I mean, literally, the private network cell sites could be a lot of small cells.
Mm-hmm.
But are there trends in that? I mean, you think about a wireless access point that's Wi-Fi, for instance. It's kind of plug and play. It's pretty small in nature.
Mm-hmm.
What are the kind of the trends in small cells from your viewpoint, as far as the size of the small cell, as well as maybe the power? What is using as far as power and so forth?
Well, the key point,
power usage.
Yeah, the key point is that small cell form factors are diversifying to meet the needs of different use cases and deployment environments. So, for instance, there are many designs that aim to make small cells inconspicuous on city furniture, while others have to be highly ruggedized for industrial scenarios. So, some companies have even designed very tiny small cells that can be embedded in infrastructure or devices. So similarly, the power levels can vary according to different use cases and regulations. So some of the shared spectrum bands require strict power limitations, especially indoors, while in some rural environments, for instance, higher power levels are permitted and can greatly increase the range. So the key is to have open platforms that enable companies to support many form factors while still remaining interoperable and with common software and management systems.
So one of the things that you've addressed today is the idea that you're going to have lots of different types of cells, different requirements, licensed, unlicensed, private networks. You also are looking at different requirements for different use cases. You're talking about openRAN. So where does the management of this come into play when you start to think about thousands and thousands of cells of different sizes, addressing different use cases, using different types of spectrum, low, mid, and high band spectrum? Does artificial intelligence or machine learning help an operator, or going to play a part in managing this network with artificial intelligence or something like that?
Absolutely. And first I have to say this was another great example of collaboration between our organizations, Chris.
Yes.
We have had a very active group within Small Cell Forum for some years, studying the challenges of siting and optimizing and managing very large numbers of cells, the kinds of volumes that we'll see in 5G. And clearly, when networks reach a certain scale, purely manual processes won't cut it. Especially as 5G will come with very high quality of service expectations, and especially for critical communications. So we're seeing a great deal of innovation and automation for planning and management, and that's now extending into the emerging area of orchestrating virtual network functions in small cell networks based on virtualized RAN architectures. And with any form of automation, it's essential that we automate the smartest processes to keep the systems highly intelligent, to maximize efficiency and QoS. So the use of AI and ML is vital in this respect, because it can capture the human experiences and best practices and make use of the massive volumes of data that modern small cells produce in real time to make strong decisions and respond to changes in traffic and user requirements on the fly.
Wow, a lot going on, and it sounds like our partnership has addressed some of the really key areas together, and Small Cell Forum by itself. Now, I know Small Cell Forum does a lot of your own forecasts, and we've talked a lot about different things today. What would be, in terms of forecasts, kind of the latest information from the Small Cell Forum about where you see that small cell market being in, I don't know, sometime in the future, maybe 5 years or whatever you want to put out there, just to give our viewers an idea where we are and where we're going?
Okay, well, that's exactly what we look at every year, is 5-year plans. We publish a market forecast each year, and it's actually in play right now. We have the data, and we're about to publish it. It takes a lot of data inputs and surveys over 100 operators globally and other deployers about their 5-year plans. So I have the answer. So this year's forecast is seeing a particularly sharp increase in the network deployments of small cells, expansions from 2023, so in 2 years, and by 2026, we forecast there will be over 6 million small cell radio units deployed. The biggest driver through the 2020s being enterprise, industrial, and IoT services. And then by 2026, private network operators will be the biggest deployers of enterprise small cells. And in all environments, shared and neutral host networks will build out networks where perhaps it wouldn't have been commercially viable for a single operator to build out. So there will also be rapid growth in urban small cells, especially from 2024, and these will be dominated by the operators. Some of the other important drivers of growth toward the middle of the decade will be adoption of open small cell architectures and rising use of shared spectrum, including the 5G unlicensed and millimeter wave.
Wow, a lot of great stuff. And that study is something that's available on your website. Is that correct?
Yes, we haven't published it yet, but we're in the process of producing it now. Our last one that's updated was in July, so by July we'll have it on our website, and you can download that.
Well, on behalf of 5G Americas and our Understanding 5G podcast, I'd like to thank Sue Monahan, CEO of the Small Cell Forum, who is actually living where she wants to live, her dream location in Florida. So thanks a lot, Sue, for spending this time with us and explaining to us your organization and your viewpoints about where we're going with small cells.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chris.